Namaste Utsada and good morning. Welcome to Hindu Lounge.
Namaste Ajay Bhai and welcome to Hindu Lounge number 55.
That's right, Utsada. For those people who are joining us for the first time, this is Hindu Lounge. Hindu Lounge is a weekly live show brought to you by Hindu Pact, which is the advocacy and policy research initiative of World Hindu Council of America, VHPA. We come live every Sunday at 11 o'clock Eastern on all our channels, YouTube, Facebook, and also Twitter. And a few days later, we are on Tag TV. This is a call-in show. I will post the ways you can reach us and participate in the show. And we talk about contemporary American Hindu issues. I am Ajay Shah. I am the president of World Hindu Council of America. And with me, as always, is Utsav Chakrabarti. Utsada is the executive director of Hindu Pact. And Utsada, with that, welcome to the show. We have couple of topics for today, and the first one is somewhat of a somber one. Anjleeben Pandya's passing, and we'll do a tribute to Anjleeben. We'll do a much fuller tribute later on. Today we'll just basically make the announcement and a brief remembrance, and then we will do a more elaborate tribute to this unique, one-of-a-kind Hindu leader in America. And then we will talk about toolkits and how the toolkit, this particular one, created by the Congress in India regarding COVID, how it is impacting Hindus in America. So Utsada, with that, I turn it over to you and to welcome our guests, and then Once you're done, we will start with our tribute to Anjleeben.
Thank you, Ajay Bhai, and welcome everybody. It is important to understand that the discussion on the latest toolkit, as we call it nowadays, much maligned word that is coming from the opposition, the main opposition party in India. This discussion didn't start here. It's part of a bigger conversation that we will touch upon when we start today on manufactured grassroots movements. So these movements look like grassroots movements, but they're actually manufactured from top down. And it started with it became much public with the Greta Thunberg toolkit. So we'll get into that today, and then obviously we'll talk about the latest toolkit activism that Ajay Bhai mentioned. But before that, Ajay Bhai, I would like you to talk about Anjleeben Pandya, who was one of the tallest leaders of American Hindu community and VHP America, and we wanted to talk about her and all of that she had given to the community. So please go ahead.
And Sudha, I'm going to share my screen, and you, please let me know when you see it.
I see it.
This
Yes.
is I had a fortune of meeting Anjleeben in 1984, when there was a Hindu conference that was organized by VHPA in New York City. It was the largest Hindu conference to date, and that was the first VHPA event that I attended. And I got to meet the stalwarts of the Hindu movement in America, and among them was Anjleeben. And I, through the years, I saw Anjleeben work for the Hindu cause tirelessly. She was a volunteer, a full-time volunteer of full-time volunteer of VHPA. She was unpaid, but she dedicated decades of her life. I think since she was 23, 24 years old, till she passed away at the age of 70 last year. And I'm sorry, last week. She worked tirelessly for Hindu cause. Um, she moved back to India about 10 years ago, but even then she did the work for as a liaison between VHP America and organizations in India. So there was like this, there was no task that was too small. There was no task that was too big. I remember we did 1993 World Hindu conference, the Hindu conference, in the memory of Swami Vivekananda, Global Hindu Conference, in the 100th anniversary of Swami Vivekananda's speech to the Parliament of Religion. And Anjleeben was, still remember her sitting on the floor in Washington, D.C., in a room where she had probably spent months, if not a whole year, just in that one place, working night and day, making sure that people were contacted, the organizing committees were formed, the minutest details related to whether it was the conference arena, whether it was food, whether it was guests that were coming from all over the world, all of that. And then you go back and you go to a smaller meeting and Anjleeben is there singing a Bhau and then you get to Diwali, and Anjleeben has sent you a Diwali greeting card, and in between she has gone and met probably the king of Thailand, or gone and organized a conference somewhere else. It is just night and day working tirelessly for Hindu cause. It didn't really matter what the project was. It didn't really matter what the task was. It didn't matter whether it was meeting the king of Thailand, or Nelson Mandela in South Africa, or meeting with a Karyakarta who has not even joined VHPA yet, or who is a kid who is 10 years old or 12 years old. And working like that for Hindu cause, for Hindu unity, working with the Hindu leaders in Bharat, whether it is, someone like Manya Sri Ashok Singhal or whether it is working with some, someone who has participated in the Ram Janmabhoomi movement, a Kar Sevak. It didn't really matter what. It is with the same kind of Shraddha, with the same kind of Atmiyata, with the same kind of, the the acceptance of all, dedicate, understanding of all, with all, I just don't have enough words so that to explain at a personal level what kind of interaction she had. So that what I thought was I will read a press release that was drafted by our own Gaurang Bhai Vaishnav, who also knew Anjleeben for a very long time. And so I'm going to read that press release, which summarizes the life work of Anjleeben Pandya to some extent. As I said, this is just a remembrance. We will do a much more elaborate, a memorial, a fitting memorial for Anjleeben when the time comes. So the press release, and usually we don't read a whole page, but this particular one we absolutely have to. So Vishwa Hindu Parishad of America regretfully announces the passing away of Anjleeben Pandya, its Director of International Liaison, on 19th of May at Gandhinagar, Gujarat, at the age of 70. She battled cancer for last 3 years. Anjleeben served Vishwa Hindu Parishad of America and the Hindu Community of America in various capacities, including as its General Secretary and also as full-time unpaid volunteer for many decades. Her contribution to VHPA right from its inception is immeasurable. Anjleben's life is an inspiration to anyone facing hardship in life. She was widowed at the age of 24 with a 2-year-old baby, and being in the US for only 3 years, she faced many challenges. From the docile young lady, she became powerhouse of energy, seva, and samarpan. She dedicated her life to the Hindu society, not only in the US, but across the world. Anjleeben started as a volunteer graphics and layout artist and a typesetter for VHPA's magazine, The Hindu Vishwa. Soon, she developed confidence and her horizon expanded to include understanding of the issues of the Hindu society in the US and management of growing organization. She was the moving force behind VHPA's major conferences in 1984 and 1993, Dharma Samsad, Dharma Prasar Yatra, hosting more than 100 Hindu saints and dignitaries for the United Nations Millennium Peace Summit, several Hindu Mandir executive conferences, etc. She excelled in working with the children and youth in the youth camps. To the campers, she was a mother. To the volunteers, she was a loving sister. She took active part in fighting Mrs. Gandhi's emergency and in Sri Ram Janmabhoomi movement. She traveled extensively to many countries where she was invited to help with the planning of major events. She was one of the key persons in managing South Africa's first World Hindu Congress in 1995 that drew more than 30,000 and was graced by the presence of Nelson Mandela and scores of saints and Swamijis. Anjleeben had the innate ability to work enthusiastically with all, from new volunteers to high and mighty. By sheer force of her dedication and sacrifices, she had earned the trust of her co-workers, religious heads, Swamijis, and national leaders. She was as at ease with meeting with the kings and of Thailand as she was entering the residence of then Prime Minister Vajpayee. She handled with finesse a challenging task of convincing various religious leaders to sit together on VHPA's platform for the good of Hindu Samaj or society. Anjleeben moved back to Bharat about 10 years back. While there, she became very active with Global Indians for Bharat Vikas, GIBV, a US-based NGO working for the rural empowerment and educating citizens of the responsibilities and rights. She served as its president in Bharat. Besides being an active volunteer, Anjleeben was an artist. She was a good painter, decorator, and a versatile singer. She also authored a book in Gujarati detailing Hindu samskars and customs as observed in certain communities in Gujarat. She leaves behind a son, a daughter-in-law, 2 grandchildren, and thousands of admirers across the world. Utsoda, this is what it means to be a Hindu karyakarta, a Hindu leader, a Hindu, a dedicated, selfless Hindu volunteer. And Anjleeben epitomized all of that and a lot more. And for all those people who have ever said that Hindu organizations are, you know, predominantly male and run by men and all of that, they don't know anything about VHPA or Hindu organizations. Anjleeben was not just the General Secretary of World Hindu Council of America. She, without her, I can I can unequivocally state that VHPA would have been not even a fraction of what it is today. Every aspect of VHPA was touched and improved and made better by Anjleeben. So, our heartfelt condolences to Anjleeben. A much more elaborate memorial is coming. We'll make an announcement in next few days. But today, we just want to let everyone know that Anjleeben Pandya, the pillar and the stalwart of World Hindu Council of America, is no more. And with that, Utsada, I request a moment of silence. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Utsada, I turn it over to you to introduce our next topic.
Thank you, Ajay Bhai, and thank you for that detailed tribute to Anjleeben. I met her once in 2003 at the Global Dharma Conference. I was designing an exhibition on the history of Hindu Dharma and Hindu Dharma in general, and she was in charge of the overall presentation of the entire venue. So her son, who's an architect, was also involved in the interior design of the venue. So I had a good opportunity to interact with her, and I saw firsthand much of the things that you discussed today. So thank you for that beautiful and detailed tribute. So moving on to our topic for discussion today, Ajay Bhai, let's look at the toolkit activism and the recent Congress toolkit. Congress, not as in American Congress, but the main opposition party in India, the Congress I, and the toolkit activism that they came up with in the last weeks. But before we go there, let's discuss what's this toolkit activism. And the word toolkit nowadays has taken a lot of negative connotations, especially after Greta Thunberg's toolkit leaked out during the so-called quote unquote farmers protest that was very, very aggressively promoted in India by a certain section of the opposition parties and quote unquote farmers in Delhi that disrupted public life in the national capital of India for a long period of time. It became a super spreader gathering for months at length, which probably led to a huge upsurge in COVID second wave in Delhi, the capital region of India, which was going through a very, very sad and tragic COVID upsurge. Weeks after this happened, these protests happened. And of course, globally, including in America and Canada, the participation of, I would say, not so friendly organizations, including separatist fundamentalist organizations based in Canada and America, in the so-called farmers protest. Their support to them, their funding to them, and obviously their messaging in support of the quote-unquote farmers protest that happened. And all of that became public when a very, very popular quote-unquote climate activist, who is known to be, very selectively a climate activist based on what geopolitical interests are being served at any given point of time, Greta Thunberg. And she leaked a toolkit that was online, that was used as a information disseminating tool for celebrities to target India and especially Indian Prime Minister Modi. So, as many people who have been following these events would know, it gave the toolkit gave out information on many disruptive organizations, including what is considered Khalistani, which is a separatist Sikh fundamentalist movement, very violent in its heydays, extremely violent, and supported by Pakistan. So a lot of things came out with the Greta Thunberg toolkit leak, and fast forward, a couple of months, and you have the same kind of activism that was coming out of the Congress party, which is the main opposition party in India. Now, people need to know that this toolkit activism that we are talking about didn't start with the Greta Thunberg toolkit leak. It started actually much before that. It actually was being used. This entire template of manufactured grassroots movements was used during the Arab Spring, which, if people remember, back in 2010, 2011, was a movement that was presented in the media globally as this democratizing movement emerging from the grassroots in the Middle East, with youth becoming westernized and then trying to topple dictatorships to bring up democracy. Except that eventually it turned out that was not the case, and all these so-called youth were actually Muslim Brotherhood youth whose goal was to turn most Middle Eastern countries into Islamic theocratic army states, or armed rebellions. And it led to the rise of Al Qaeda in Tunisia. It led to the rise of Al Qaeda and the persistence of Al Qaeda in Libya today. Libya is now a very violent country with slavery in full force. It led to the rise of ISIS in big areas of the Middle East. Nobody would have imagined that, even 20 years ago, that an area like the Middle East, with so many military powers, with so much interest, with so much resources in control of that area, giving up a size of land which is bigger than most countries in Europe to a Islamic caliphate, which was based on like 6th century radical Islamic thoughts in the 21st century. But it happened because of this Arab Spring and the toolkit uprisings that were engineered back in 2010. So ISIS, Al Qaeda, and the rise of the so-called Arab Spring Islamic rulers, you owe that to toolkit activism. So this is just to give a background of where this toolkit activism comes from. And I'm not saying that everything bad came out of it. There might have been something good that came out of it, but it's the trend of manufactured grassroots movements that is happening around the world, and it has been now very thoroughly embraced by both opposition elements and thought leaders in India, as well as global players who may or may not have India's best interests in mind. And as you saw with Greta Thunberg's toolkit, most of the time they don't have India's best interest in mind. And so now we will dive into, Ajay Bhai, the INC
the
toolkit.
big item in last couple of weeks has been that the Congress party in India brought out its own toolkit. Now, at least that's what we observed on Twitter, and that's what we read in the papers. Who knows? In anything that on Twitter, who put out what, but there's certainly, it is very consistent with the stand that Congress has taken. So if you were to really look at all the statements that the Congress and the opposition leaders have made in India, and you kind of match it with the toolkit that they put that was exposed on Twitter, you would think that you would say that this looks certainly reasonable, that this toolkit origin toolkit regardless of what the origin was on Twitter, the toolkit certainly is a playbook by which the people who don't like Hindus have played by in India. So, for example, I I think so that you said that, Churchill once said that never let a good crisis go to waste, right? And in opposition party took this up as an opportunity to beat up the ruling party, which is natural. But the way they did it, so opposition parties have a duty in some sense to oppose, um, except when it's really uh, impacting your country, impacting the health and lives of the people who live there. In good faith opposition is always a good thing, but this one exceeded a bit a good faith opposition, and it almost was as if that this was an attempt to see if you can use the kind of activism that was used in the Arab Spring and use this crisis, the COVID crisis that we have talked about in the on this show in past, use this crisis to somehow uh, you know engineer a regime change in India against Modi. So that it seemed to me and seemed to a lot of people that this was an attempt at regime change. And Twitter, will come to the social media role in more detail, but it was almost as if Twitter itself was playing a part in making sure that the opposition in India got all the help it needed. Um, so that why don't you take us step by step, and I'll put it up on the screen, step by step to the to through this toolkit as we saw on Twitter. And it starts, not surprisingly, from Kumbh Mela, because Hindus are an easy target, and you can, even though there are so many such events of farmers agitation and all the other things going on, but what better place to start than a gathering of Hindus, right? So let me share the screen and please walk us through it.
Yeah, I mean, as you can see, other Ajay, in this, once the screen comes up, we will show
So
the
hopefully you
next
can
one,
see.
Ajay.
Not yet. Okay, let me
No,
try
no, the
again.
next one. This next slide.
This is this slide, or maybe let me go again here. Share screen. Ah, that was the wrong slide. How about now?
That's better. So if you can make it bigger, I think people will be able to see what's written. Yeah, that's perfect. Uh, so the Congress toolkit, and both the Congress party and many people who support the Congress party on social media and have direct links to it have tried to say that this is something that was not fully accurate, and there were counter accusation, obviously, and we can agree that these things happen on social media, and there is never 100% accuracy in terms of confirming what part is accurate and what part is not. But what is accurate is that we can actually measure and cross-check the statements that were actually made by leaders in the opposition in India, and some of the points that were in the toolkit. And one of those points being that when the second wave of COVID hit, and it hit India really badly. India is still reeling under the tragic consequences of this second wave. Uh, a concerted effort was actually made to try to promote the fact that this gathering of Hindu pilgrims was called the Kumbh Mela, and obviously most Hindus who are watching this show know what Kumbh Mela is. For those who don't, it's one of the largest gatherings of Hindus in northern part of the Indian subcontinent, where people gather to bathe in the rivers and pay their obeisance.
So just to add, actually, if you in normal times, in non-COVID times, Kumbh is the largest gathering of human beings anywhere in the world.
That's Mahakumbh, Ajay. So
Mahakumbh, yeah.
yeah. So that was
and
not what was
normally the
happening.
Mahakumbh, every 4 years, the Mahakumbh that happens, that is the largest one.
Correct.
Right. This is
So
one of the
this was
smaller
not a
ones.
Mahakumbh Mela. It was
This
not
was not a
that.
Mahakumbh. You're
Actually,
right.
it was
You're right.
not that big of a gathering either. But
Right. Right.
a concerted effort was made. That, I mean, I really looked at the number of gatherings that happened throughout India on Friday prayers in mosques. And if you really put together some of the large mosques that have Friday prayers and continue to have Friday prayers in many places during the height of COVID
Well,
second
there was a
wave.
farmers' agitation, right? With
Correct. I'm
tens
getting
of
there. I'm
thousands of
getting there.
people
I'm getting
gathered
to that.
everywhere. And right now, actually, in the places where farmers' agitation was took place, has the highest COVID. If you go to Haryana and the western part of UP and Punjab, the COVID cases there are the highest.
Correct. I was going to get to that. But
Oh, sorry.
so what I'm saying is that, if I really found out that there were far more people gathering every Friday in mosques around India than that were gathered in at the Kumbh Mela venue. And a concerted effort was made by the Congress Toolkit, as we found out later, to promote the messaging that the best way to target Prime Minister Modi and India's so-called Hindutva narrative is to promote the fact that Kumbh gathering was the reason that the second wave hit so badly. Not true, but that effort was made, and media around the world, not just in India. I mean, there is a big section of the Indian media that is very anti-Modi, that had always been anti-Modi for the last 20 years. But that is, that's acceptable, because any country, you don't expect media to be always supportive of one party or one ruler of that party. But there was a global effort, around the world, media like New York Times, Washington Post, push two main narratives: that the second COVID wave in India happened because of Kumbh Mela, and to show persistently cremation of Hindus who were getting, who passed away during COVID. It was to the point where there was no pictures of COVID available out there except cremation pictures, and Indians would be paid huge sums of money to put a camera on drones just so that they can take videos of cremations. So this was a very concerted effort that was done. And you have to understand that cremation is something that is very, very theologically very, very alien and disliked by Christians and Muslims around the world, because it is theologically very antithetic to their religion. And that's why it has this, almost a, for lack of a better word, and I'm really sorry to use this word, but a spectacular quality to it that they want to cash on and show people. So that's why it was so important for them to show cremations, because it was an enabling tool for othering the Hindu community, not just in India, but around the world.
And
So
so what is really stinging to most Hindus is weaponization of Hindu words. So you remember last year when we were talking about Holi against Hindutva. So you take the Hindu festival, an auspicious Hindu occasion, and you weaponize it. And here they're doing the same thing with Kumbh. So, for example, super spreader Kumbh. This is taking a Hindu, an auspicious Hindu event and weaponizing it against Hindus around the world. So
and
these are
and
the kinds of words that are, these are not even dog whistles. So that these are the sticks to beat Hindus with. That, hey, look, you are a super spreader. Your festival is super spreader. Now go out and defend it, right? And but
correct.
when it
And
comes in
and
the
and to
same
be honest
toolkit,
with you, I mean, that worked. I had so many Americans come to me and say this, that, hey, why are Hindus having religious festivals with thousands of people gathering when you are going through this humongous second wave that is causing so much trouble to the people of India? People came and
yeah,
asked me that, and I'm like, okay, but actually the places where the second wave is happening at its worst are places where very few people even probably went to the Kumbh, and there was nothing. They had nothing to do with the Kumbh
yeah,
gathering.
and
In
so
fact,
that
the correlation, as
I
I would say tonight now, is actually with the farmers' protest. And
yeah.
it was found out that most of the people in Delhi who got COVID in the last 1 month, actually 60%, more than 60%, the COVID came from a variant that originated in what is Punjab, which is from where the farmers were, the quote unquote farmers, were all coming from for protesting and blocking streets of Delhi. So I think if there is any correlation, it was the farmers' protest, which was the super spreader event. And it's going to start again, mind you, Ajay bhai, because now the cases in Delhi have gone down, and there is little bit of respite from the emergency that literally sieged the population for the last 1 month, and the farmers' protest are starting again. And if this is not something that people in India can find correlation with, then I'm sorry, but Congress toolkit really worked. But coming back, so,
yeah. So just on on that, right? You had people, you had non-Indians. I had so many Indians, and with Hindu names come to me and say, "Look, it was all because of Kumbh that the second wave started." So there's a big, But if you look at number D here, it says. Our non-party office bearers and supporters can be encouraged to use social media posts to highlight by carefully using pictures that Kumbh is shown. Kumbh is a show of political power in the name of religion, while Eid gatherings, because Eid was a couple of weeks ago, Eid gatherings are happy social gatherings of families and communities. And so this is, again, we are thinking, we are not talking about India here, we're talking about from the American perspective. And from American perspective, the image that gets created, because these are the things that get reported in New York Times, they get reported to Washington Post, that get reported to by major press agencies, whether they are AP or Reuters and other agencies, and the image it ends up creating of India, the Hindu India, is this people who are uneducated, ignorant, and who go around, spreading, who have no knowledge of these infectious diseases and, engage in activities that promote it. And Congress succeeded, at least when it came to the Western media. The next part that you have slide that you have selected is about Prime Minister Modi's event. And I know this is an interesting one, right? Because Prime Minister Modi was not allowed to come to America for several years after the Godhra, burning of train where Hindus were massacred, who were traveling at the train, and the riots that followed and all of that. And then Prime Minister Modi became quite popular in America because he developed very good relationship with President Obama, and he continued this good relation he had with President Obama with President Trump. There were three Howdy Modi events that took place, and all of these events. One was Howdy Modi, one was in California, a similar event with a different name, and one was in New York City. So three big mass events that took place in America. And there's this, a very strong support base that Prime Minister Modi has in America among Hindus. And we even talked about a survey which actually validates that. Now, despite of this crisis, the Prime Minister's ratings, approval ratings, have not gone down in India, and they've not gone down in America. It's pretty much the same, because his government and him are tirelessly working to make sure that they do the best they can in making with the limited resources in terms of the starting materials for vaccines, or amount of oxygen available, amount of number of hospital beds available. So all this tireless effort has has resulted in Prime Minister's approval rating not going down. So what does this toolkit talk about, so that when it comes to Prime Minister's image? So that you're on mute.
Yeah. So as you can see on the screen, it basically focuses on how to make sure that Prime Minister Modi actually gets hit with the second wave's public distrust and public grievance. And what was most interesting is that if you look point number C, use of dramatic pictures of funerals and dead bodies, which is already being done by foreign media. So they are asking journalists to be facilitated by local Congress party cadres to take dramatic pictures of cremations of bodies. There was even information that people were digging up bodies from graves and throwing them in rivers to make it look like people are throwing bodies in the river. So this is something that really should bother people around India, because if a political party is willing to go to the extent of even disrespecting dead people and people who have passed away, in most Western countries, people have laws that protect their privacy when they pass away. And please excuse my daughter speaking in the back. She's starting to talk now, so now we have background music as I speak. So it's really tragic that in Western countries there are rules and regulations that prevent these media from showing private funerals. But in India, because obviously India is othered and Hindus don't deserve that privacy in the minds of the Western media, and at the end of the day, their only and sole goal is to destabilize the country and get rid of leaders they don't like. They will show as much as possible, as many dead people they can, and in as brutal and aggressive ways as they can. And as you can see from the toolkit, that was done.
I'm sorry, we went to a wrong slide for some reason. Let me get back to this slide that you were talking about, Utsada. I think something, for some reason we jumped this slide. Let me see if I can go back to the slide you were talking about.
I think somehow something got deleted.
I retrieved them. Not to worry. We are a friendly show here, so things happen. And then they did. So here we are back to the slide.
Correct. No, so that's the point. I mean, as people can read, their main effort is to attack the Prime Minister of India. And the use of the word regime itself is a toolkit. It's a toolkit term. So the word regime basically came up again during Arab Spring,
right?
Correct. So the use of the word regime was basically a toolkit term that was developed in the 2010-2011 Arab Spring movement, because that's how you delegitimize leaderships and governments in countries. And it probably was relevant in many cases, in places in the Middle East, because there were dictatorships with individuals having all the power. So you could probably term them as regimes if you didn't like them. But obviously, these the same people would not term another dictator a regime if they like them. But in the case of India, it actually doesn't apply, because Prime Minister Modi has actually gone through elections, not once, but twice. The largest electoral and democratic process in the entire world, not once, but twice. And as people would agree, these are free and fair elections. These are not, cooked up elections. Just last month, Prime Minister Modi's political party did not get enough seats to come to power in the state of West Bengal. If he was a dictator who ruled a regime, that shouldn't have happened, because at the end of the day, he could have controlled and changed elections. So in India, you have free and fair elections, and to call the Modi government a regime itself is one of the biggest efforts at delegitimizing Indian governance and the people of India. Most importantly, it's a disrespect to the people of India.
And by extension, Hindus and people of Indian origin living outside of India.
Exactly. So it delegitimizes everybody who stands for democracy around the world. As it is, poorer countries in the world, in to use American terms, countries with people of color are delegitimized in mainstream media because there are few countries which are democratic. And India, which has upheld the constitution and which has been a democracy without any dictatorship, without any military rule for the last 70 years, the most disrespect you can show to Hindus around the world and to Indians around the world is for mainstream media outlets like Washington Post and New York Times and all these global mind framers to call Modi government a regime. And that is something that people in India should take very seriously, and that is something they should be punishing governments opposition parties like the Congress party in India for actually using this term. Just because
So,
you
so, so that,
lose election doesn't mean that the
yep,
election is not, that is a very good sign of showing how much of a anti-India opposition you are at this point of time.
absolutely. So that let me highlight a couple of things here, right? So
I
one of
wanted to
them is
highlight,
says that,
Ajay, I wanted to highlight one more point before,
yeah,
I
please go
wanted to
ahead.
highlight the use of the term Indian strain and again put it in a global
I was just
context.
going to come to that. So perfect. Go for
Okay.
it.
So,
You are more articulate than me, so you go for it.
so the term Indian strain was also used in the toolkit. Again, to specifically target India and to specifically target Prime Minister Modi. In fact, if you see the last point of the toolkit, they are saying that try using the term Indian strain first so that it gets focused on India in the global media, and then see if you can use it and get away with the term Modi strain. And actually, it's journalists started using the term Modi strain. There's a journalist called Sonia Falero, who is a very anti-Modi, very anti-Hindu journalist, a big journalist, uh, a daughter of a big Congress leader from Goa. Sonia Falero actually used the word Modi strain. And this was deliberate, as you can see in the toolkit, and it was to test people's acceptance on how far they're willing to go. And the funny thing is that in the entire world, there has been a movement in the last 1 year to make sure that no country gets tagged with any COVID strain. In fact, America actually made legislations just last week so that people cannot use the term China strain, even though COVID originated in China, or China virus or Wuhan virus. Those terms actually were delegitimized in America and around the world so that people don't get discriminated on the basis of where the COVID strains originated. And here you have the biggest opposition party in India making a toolkit. Obviously, global media outlets, quote unquote, liberal media outlets who have huge problems calling it China virus, picking up the term Indian strain. And they had no problems picking up the term South African strain either, because, obviously South Africa is another place where you can get away with anything. So you can go and make them look bad. So it's a very,
Yeah,
hypocritical way that liberals around the world operate, or I use the word liberals in quotes, and their media
yeah,
friends operate. And Congress actually did this. They institutionalized the term Indian strain in their toolkit, and then they even are attempting to make it a Modi strain. So imagine the next step that they're going to
it is a
in terms
Hindu
of
strain,
achieving.
right? The
Yeah,
next step is Hindu strain. Uh,
that will come at a global level. Congress will not do that because
to come at a
Congress knows
global level.
that
But
India
so
is
that
still a
let
Hindu
me
majority
just say
country.
this to your point. Let me
Yeah.
just say one thing. Last week, a few people around the world used the word Singapore strain, and Singapore government actually came down really hard on the people who use the word Singapore strain, because this is how you castigate one country. And again, people used to associate, there was a legitimate naming convention to name the virus or strain, or a virus based on the geographic origin. But as soon as the virus, this particular COVID-19 strain became prevalent, China, working with World Health Organization, other countries came together and said, do not associate the virus strain with geographic location. There was an agreement there to not use this correlation correction, what do you call it? And here it is, a Indian political party, supposedly a, uh national opposition party in India, actually associating the virus with the name India. I don't know how a party that seeks to gain power in India uh, maligns India on a global stage, and then still can go back to its own people in India and say, we want to be your representative. How can they do that in good faith? I want to point out a couple of other things, Soda. Um, I think you already mentioned the dramatic pictures of funerals and dead bodies. You There's also this other one where it says International media coverage by foreign correspondents in India can be tailored exclusively to focus on Modi and his mismanagement. Now, not just the journalists, Sudha. Last week, a prominent American academic with the Hindu sounding name actually conducted an informal survey, one of those Twitter surveys, and he wrote an article first which said that who are the 5 leaders at the global scale who mismanaged the COVID crisis. Okay, I don't want to legitimize this person by giving his name or put a reference to his article, but this is a prominent Indian Hindu American academic in America who actually wrote an article about 5 world leaders who mismanaged the COVID crisis. He put Modi at the number 1 position, and then he put it out for a poll. And on Twitter poll, as you can imagine, with all Twitter being manipulated in one way or the other, 90% of the people, when I checked the poll last, said Modi is the worst crisis manager for COVID crisis. Now, you see the dichotomy here, also that Modi's rating is not going down because people in India, where he is the prime minister, thinks that he's doing his best. Someone sitting in America, in the ivory tower, puts out an article that he is mismanaging the crisis the worst possible way, and all the minions on Twitter who are manipulated by various countries and their intelligence agencies and all the left cabal that belong to India, and they send out these tweets and enter the and vote in the poll. Most of it probably even robotic polling, and say, look, Modi is the worst crisis manager. In an attempt to build this anti-Modi, anti-India, anti-Hindu narrative. Okay, so this is how the toolkit activism is evolving now. So journalists.
Well, the funny part is that the same people actually, when India got hit by the first wave, which was actually much milder compared to the global COVID crisis that emerged last year in summer and later on a little bit in winter, they had the same narrative also last year before the second wave hit. So even when India was doing really well in COVID management, and given its population last year, it was actually, that's one of the reasons why the second wave hit so bad, because most people in India thought that Indians are not, Indians will not be affected by COVID because it did so well in managing the first phase of COVID crisis. Even at that time, the same people were making a list of the worst COVID managers in the world, and it was still Modi on the top of the list. I still remember that. So when there was amazingly good management last year, that led many people in India to, actually take down their guard and cause this really bad second wave. That time also Modi was the worst COVID manager in the world, COVID crisis manager in the world. And after the real second wave hit, which was actually really bad, and it was hitting most of the states that were not even ruled by the Modi, the political party that Prime Minister Modi belongs to. It hit those states the worst, where the opposition party was in power. But even then, Modi is the worst COVID manager in the world.
Talk a little bit about the Frontal Congress organization. If you want to just summarize this slide before we go to the next one.
I just think that, this whole toolkit activism that keeps emerging again and again in India points to something very real and something very unfortunate, which is
sinister. Actually,
it is very sinister. It is very sinister, which is that there is a global effort being made to make sure that India fits into this narrow worldview of the world, especially the powers, global powers that are interested in India. And that worldview is that India should remain what it was in the last 70 years, when it was a third world country with a huge market, with enough buying power to actually be a market for the global powers that be, but with not enough political will and geopolitical strength to be a force to be reckoned with. And any effort by a leader like Modi to take India to that next level of self-reliance, of of economic muscle and of civilizational identity that can take India away from that third world, market, global market kind of country, is going to be opposed, is going to be changed, and it's going, and that is why the Modi government faces so much destabilization effort at a global level. And
So let's talk a little bit about Sam Javed.
well, she is again, she was the author of the toolkit, and somehow it seems that she's also part of the effort that was made by certain fact-checking organization. I put that in quotes because many of the times these so-called fact-checking organizations are actually part of the toolkit activism itself. So Sam Javed is one of the authors of the toolkit, and it somehow also is one of the people who is part of the fact-checking group that is saying that the toolkit was not right, and it's a propaganda effort by the Modi government and its supporters. So you can see the connection. You have at the back end the same people doing the propaganda and then saying that the other side is doing the propaganda, and what is actually propaganda is a game by the other side. So it's a very complicated, murky effort, and we are going to continue to see this globally because social media is something that is going to increasingly become a tool for changing people's opinion, misguiding people. It is the next generation of warfare. Like disinformation is the next generation of warfare in which everybody is now part of, and it frames public opinion. And it is important for Hindus to understand that. It's important for Hindus to understand and resist it, because otherwise, we will just remain useful idiots at the hands of many of these global players.
So let me go to a little bit role of the social media in maligning the Hindus when the toolkit activism takes this prominence, right? So let me go to this particular screenshot that we got. You see this Twitter's attempt to shield Congress over toolkit controversy exposes U.S. regime change operation against Modi. The reason this headline, Utsada, is because the person, Sambhito Patra, who posted the toolkit, when he, when he tweeted about it, his tweet was labeled as manipulated media by Twitter. Okay, that is so Twitter is now passing a judgment on whether the news is fact or not based on who knows what, because certainly Twitter does not have an unbiased view as we have seen from past. We know that Twitter Twitter is an active participant in a lot of things that are anti-Hindu, starting with the way Jack Dorsey, when he was in India, was holding the politically motivated slogans, and he got that he had no business, no understanding of, and here he is, and here is Twitter taking a legitimate political party spokesperson's tweet and labeling it without actually disproving. There's absolutely no one has actually come out and said that this toolkit is fake. Twitter is exercising its own judgment. So this should be a part of a larger conversation that we should have. But really, the promise of internet was that that internet will promote free speech. Internet will unshackle the ordinary people from the commercially controlled or mass or government controlled media, and ordinary people will now have a voice. And here is Twitter now curtailing, becoming the government, becoming a monopolistic commercial entity, becoming a judge of what is right and what is wrong, and whose free speech should be honored and whose free speech should not be. This, to me, Utsada, is a legitimate civil liberties issue. And at some point, we should talk about it in much more detail and hold these kinds of monopolies over free speech accountable, because if not, we are now transcending into a world where no legitimate uh, freedom of speech will exist.
That is correct. And, if I may go out on a limb and say this, by 2024, when the next main big national general elections in India come up, you will see much more of this. You will literally have direct intervention of social media giants, in national elections in India, that will be trying to delegitimize either Prime Minister Modi's government or anybody who wishes to replace him from his political party. So I can assure you that that's going to happen in 2024. That is exactly where this is heading. And I think people in India need to know and understand it from now on itself. And it has been attempted in other parts of the world as well. In many cases, it works because information is the next, disinformation is the next theater of war. And that is going to happen in 2024 during the general elections, in national
I
elections
know,
in India.
Utsada, I can tell you that that will not work in India for multiple reasons. They can try, but the kind of grassroots level campaigning and work that happens in India, and the way the judicial system and the political system is set up in India, that kind of influence that social media, uh, has in some of the other countries is not going to be, is not going to be possible in India. Just my view. We'll wait for it to unfold. So that I want to close this topic out by talking about the toolkit's impact on Hindus in America. So I'll start with one, and then I'll turn it over to you. I think one of the biggest impact is that here are Hindu organizations like VHP America, like Seva International. They're all trying to, uh, you know, uh, garner resources, collect donations, and really trying to help people in India. When these kinds of news items, concerted negative reports about India come out, I think that impacts this fundraising, and that impacts, that impacts what people feel like doing, because people say, these people are careless. They're gathering for religious gathering, and all these Hindus don't understand. It doesn't matter what I donate, right? So it weakens the relief effort that is so needed right now. I also think, Utsada, that this is the kind of emotional manipulation of people that is meant to weaken the tie between Hindus who live in America and Hindus who live in India. And this weakening tie will end up, not only it breaks the tie between the Hindus in and the support they have for each other and all of that, but it also weakens the attachment that Hindus have towards their Punya Bhumi, which is India, and then the political opponents of India, the countries who don't like India, the communities that don't like India, they now can uh, get anti-India legislations in US pass much more easily. Okay, so this, because now they've weakened the opposition to people, Hindus in America, who are supporters of India. So that is the other thing. It also perpetuates the image of Hindus as people who are poverty stricken, undereducated, uneducated, ignorant, and whose stock in life is always to be this miserable, suffering people. The extension of what kind of portrayal that British colonialists, or even before that, Islamic colonialists had made of India. And that image of Hindus means that every Indian kid who goes to a school in America, every Indian who is working of Hindu origin, every Hindu of Indian origin who is working at a large corporation or a small corporation, is looked upon as this strange being who is who who is this uneducated, ignorant person, and who is uh, you know who is lesser than other people in the community. I think these are the kinds of things that are so the reason so that we spend so much time on the toolkit today is not because that toolkit is going to have a huge impact in India itself, but the adverse impact that the toolkit has on Hindus in America. So that, what do you think? So that you may be on mute.
Yeah, no, I as you pointed out, there is adverse impact, and you can see the adverse impact on Hindus in America, because now you can see an entire generation of Hindus who are growing up in America being fed on this propaganda that is inaccurate, and that makes them really feel less about themselves. It Because they always people always relate to their heritage, and their heritage, if their heritage is presented in with so much misinformation, with so much distortion, and with so much negativity, this affects them, and it affects other people who bully them in their and this is why this is a different world now. And it affected the Japanese in World War II. Japanese Americans were interned in camps because, and what is happening with this toolkit misinformation is a psychological version of that internment that is happening to Hindu Americans, especially those who come from Indian origin. And you know I noticed this in real terms. Two things happened with regards to relief efforts. Organizations that don't have the best interest of India in mind were given more legitimacy, because they would publicly target India and the government of India in their effort to raise money for those who are suffering during COVID. So they are achieving two things: they are raising money, and they're also delegitimizing and targeting India at the same time. And they're getting money from average people, because average people think that India is actually doing really badly, and the government in India doesn't deserve any help for this COVID during this COVID crisis. And to be honest with you, that is very disingenuous, because even today, as we speak, the worst COVID environment in India that happened in the last 2 weeks parallels the worst that happened in America in January and February this year. This year in January and February, again, at that time, President Trump, was not in power. Therefore, it didn't make news because nobody could blame him for it. This year in February, America was losing more people every day than India was losing at its worst in the last 2 weeks. So, it is, you didn't see global media outlets talking about it because it didn't fit the toolkit narrative. And you will continue to see all these organizations, and I could name many of them, but it's better that we keep them, because they're still raising money.
I,
Many of these organizations are actually going to use that money that they raised in the name of COVID to create unrest in India, to create support terrorism in India. I will go out and say that, because there are many of those organizations that actually are front groups of terrorist organizations, and India will see far more violence and far more delegitimization and targeted uh, misinformation in the coming months in the name of COVID relief. And the vice versa, there are organizations that were really doing real COVID relief work that were targeted in America because they are sympathetic towards what the government of India was doing to provide COVID relief, and therefore they were delegitimized in America. And a very good example of that was Seva International. Despite being the biggest grassroots organization with the biggest grassroots level fundraising in America, there were institutionalized entities in America that were targeting Seva International, because Seva International was not targeting the Modi regime as the toolkit toolkit media would call it.
absolutely. So with that, let's bring this topic to an end, and let's go to the Hindu good news of the week. Utsada, you are going to like this. You're going to like the title of this. The title of this good news of the week, Utsada, is Namaste, Alabama. So, Utsada, as you know, 30 years ago, Alabama banned yoga in public school because Alabama, in its infinite wisdom, thought that saying doing yoga in high schools, in schools, would make everyone a Hindu. Uh, so there was a legislation that came up this year where one of the legislators said hey, the world has moved on in 30 years. Everyone is doing yoga. 20% of American population has done yoga at one time or the other. 10% population practices yoga every week, or more than 10%. So finally, Alabama signed, Alabama passed a legislation that says you can do yoga. And Alabama Governor Kay Ivey signed a bill to allow yoga in public school. But, big but, so uh, they said that, and I'll read this. The new law allows yoga to be offered as an elective for grades K-12, while it erases the ban that over the years, some schools had not realized even existed. Okay, people just doing it. It also imposes restrictions on how yoga should be taught. Students won't be allowed to say namaste, for instance, and meditation will not be allowed. So that I think the only thing Maya really does really well, among many others, but one thing that she has really mastered for ever since she was like 4 months old is doing namaste. And she'll go to a school in Alabama and she won't be able to do namaste. So what's going on here? And then the other things that are not allowed are chanting, mantra, mudra, use of mandalas, induction of hypnotic states, guided imagery, and namaste greetings shall all be expressly prohibited. It also requires English names to be used for all the poses and exercises. So only downward facing dog, okay? Utsada, nothing else, no other name. And before any, and no Surya Namaskar, it has to be sun salutation. And before any students try tree pose, so that keep this in mind, because you have a daughter who is only a year and 4 months old. Make sure that you give her specific permission and a permission slip before she can try the tree pose. Okay,
Well,
so that you got all that?
yes. The thing is that at the end of the day, you can take a you can try to dress up, American liberals and conservatives as being non-denominational, non Christian fundamentalist. But at the end of the day, the reality shows up in places like Alabama. The reason I think it is important that we address and understand the 80-pound gorilla in the room, which is that at the end of the day, the world sees yoga as a Hindu practice, and that is correct. And if the world sees yoga as a Hindu practice, it's a Hindu, asanas, and most of the world doesn't actually understand what yoga means. Uh, Most of the world actually calls yoga what most Hindus would call asanas, and some would add pranayam to it. So dhyana, pranayam, and asanas, these three Hindu practices are pretty much what the world knows as yoga. And actually, I would be honest with you, most Hindus think the same way too. Most Hindus think just these three practices comprise what yoga means. And if somebody believes, and I think they are accurate in believing that Christians will not go to heaven if they do yoga, they will try to ban it. They will try to ban namaste. They will try to ban, because these are real Hindu religious terms. So yeah, they will try to ban it. The question is whether they should or not. And that's where Hindus in America have to take a stand. Would you want a state government like that of Alabama to ban Hindu practices? If you believe that they should, then go with it. I have no issues with what the state of Alabama did, if they actually believe that they are not going to go to heaven. A Christian is not going to go to heaven if they do yoga, and I believe they won't. So I have a very different position from you, Ajay bhai. I believe
No,
that, yeah,
I didn't express my position yet, Utsav. I
no,
just
no, but
read
you
the
were
news item.
critical of what Alabama did.
No. I just read the news item. Come on. I just read it in a light way. And I just said, look, I mean, I'm just going to go to Alabama. And, I lived in Mississippi for a long time. So I visited Alabama many times. So I just go to Alabama now and just say, Namaste, Alabama. That's all. I'm not saying anything else.
Well,
I, you
yeah.
know,
So
I,
yeah. So all I'm going to say is that is the reality of Christian theology, and whether that should be the case in an American political and social setting or not is the question. And that's where the
I,
debate
I, I, th- I think we should discuss this in more detail. The reason I say this, Utsada, is look, I mean, there are grievances in Alabama and other states about not displaying 10 commandments in the classroom. And there are other, that, are not saying prayers during football game and things like that. So I think, this is, to some extent, this is a reaction to that as well. And I think there are legitimate arguments to be made. I just found this to be, interesting that, that you cannot, that namaste, which is, a universal greeting as far as I can tell from it's just Hindus, Buddhists, Jains, Sikhs, in many, many different ways, do namaste. And it is basically acknowledging the goodness in the other people, divinity in the other person. But I understand that theologically it may not be, other people may not see it that way. And so I think it deserves a larger discussion. On the other hand, don't you have to use English names for all the poses? That is laughable. I mean, I can see not saying namaste. I can see not allowing not allowing meditation in a certain way, and those kinds of things I can understand, or not doing mantras and japas. I understand that. But to say that, oh, you shall use only English name for asanas, come on, really? Alabama can do better than that.
So the reason I think that the reason it brings us to a much more important topics that American Hindus need to understand, and that is non-translatables in Hindu, in Sanskrit and Hindu religious terminology. The reason they are using English words to present the actual Sanskrit terms in yoga is because it delegitimizes Hindu identity of yoga, and it helps to make yoga. And again, I'm using the term yoga as a generic term that for common people use. It's actually asanas, dhyana, and pranayam. The reason these terms are used is because that's where the roots. It's the honest part of being a practitioner of yoga. They're trying to delegitimize that honesty, and they're trying to make it one step further away from its original Hindu essence. And that's why they're trying to replace the terms with English terms, because that's the first step to delegitimizing yoga as a Hindu practice. And the next step would be to make it a Christian practice, which has also happened in many parts of the world.
This has also happened.
Yeah.
So that we should do a
and then,
program.
the ironic part would be that after the entire delegitimization and then digestion has happened into Christianity, they will go to India and other parts of the world where there are dharmic civilizations, Hindu, Buddhist, and all these civilizations. And then they will teach yoga as a Christian practice to them. And then people will even lap it up even more, because now it's a Western Christian practice. So think about that.
So that with that, let's acknowledge at least the good news. Alabama, you can now in school, you can do yoga without using any Sanskrit names, except one. Yoga, a Sanskrit name will still be, you can still say yoga in a school, even though that word itself is a Sanskrit word.
Trust me, it will also change eventually. Like somebody will bring up, once this steady slide happens, they will turn it into,
Utsada,
unnatural
celebrate.
human calisthenics or something like that.
Utsada, celebrate for a second. Celebrate. Don't worry about it. Today, enjoy
I'm
today.
Celebrating. I don't have any issue.
You're too serious all the time. Thank
No,
Alabama
that's
for
just something you like to say because you are less serious than me.
Thank Alabama for recognizing one Sanskrit word at a time. Today's Sanskrit word that Alabama has recognized is yoga. And we need to thank Alabama, and we need to acknowledge Alabama for recognizing the word yoga while not recognizing any of the asanas as Sanskrit words. So with that, we go once again to Hindu Seva Charity Act of the Week. And here is our song.
I think your sound has gone, but we can discuss the Hindu Seva Charity of the Week. Ajay bhai. The sound you had is gone.
Oh, the sound didn't come?
No, it started, but then it went away, which is fine because now we
Okay.
can just talk about the Hindu Seva charity.
But wait. This is my favorite part of the show. So that how can we do it without sound coming? I think because I stopped sharing the screen, but you got the idea. So that once again we continue to raise funds as VHPA for COVID relief. I'm glad to report that so far VHP America has raised close to 1.65 million dollars for COVID relief. We have raised the funds for two kind of multiple activities, and we certainly want to acknowledge all the people who have uh, who have donated the money. I would urge people to go to our website vhpamerica.org and click on the donate button and make a contribution. So that I am going to let's see if I can just share my screen. I'm going to share it and I'm going to show you some of the activities that VHP America has done. Let me just share the screen with you and everyone else. If I can find my Zoom window, let's see. Yeah, right. Here we go. So here's the screen. I wanted to show you all the activities that we as VHPA have done. And by the way, this is our newsletter that people can actually go and subscribe to. And you can see that we have done, we send out regular monthly newsletters. And this one just went out today. It has some information about Anjleeben that we mentioned in the show. By the way, so that before I do want to talk about that also, but here you can see the VHP Chicago that sent out this large military grade oxygen concentrators, were three of them worth $1 million. We also have, and there's a nice write up on that on our website and also in this newsletter. The Aviation Minister of India, Hardeep Singh Puri, actually acknowledged the contribution by World Hindu Council of America or VHPA. And these were sent to different parts of India. They landed in Ahmedabad. One was in Gujarat. One went to Nadiad, I believe, in Gujarat. And third one, I'm trying to remember where it went, but we can get the details out on our website. So that then this is the really very interesting, unique kind of programs that VHP America is supporting to the tune of $165,000. As you can imagine, with any crisis of this magnitude, there is, you need wood for creation because electrical crematoriums are running at capacity, and cutting down trees has environmental impact. So VHP America is supporting this respectful farewell to the departing soul in an environmentally friendly, ecologically sustainable way. And these are the these are the machines that create logs from cow dung, and this has the impact of saving in a sustainable way, saving the cows from slaughterhouse on one hand. On the other hand, it also creates an environmentally friendly fuel for cremation. And nobody wants to talk about it. It is, it is not a pleasant thing, but we want to make sure that the cremations are respectful and at the same time they're ecologically sustainable. A lot of research has gone into this by various organizations in India, and we continue to support it. So that I want to go to, these are the some of the activities that VHP America has done to support COVID relief in India. You can see that. You can see our call to action here at the summary. We have donated $238,000, 225,000 oxygen concentrators, the smaller ones, 85,000 donation for the creation project from VHP National, others from other 65,000 or more, with 96,000 in pledges from Support a Child program, which itself is funded through generous donations. But from that money, we've been able to give from the savings some money for COVID relief where children are impacted. Again, 1,000 units of oxygen concentrators through that program. You can see the even our chapters, and I'm just listing one. There are multiple ones, but you can see that even chapter in Florida is contributing to the COVID relief. Also, that I want to point out a couple of programs that VHPA is doing. Our Chicago chapter is opening, and now the registration is open for Chicago Bal Vihar. So people who have little kids who are interested, please go to the balviharchicago.org website, click on the register button, and and sign up your kids. A Hindu Pack / American Hindus Against Defamation program today, Utsada, in the evening, in partnership with Dharma Civilization Foundation, or DCF. This is an AHAD initiative on Hindu Dvesha or on Hindu phobia. We are doing this program in partnership with the Jewish Federation and the Holocaust Resource Center of Keene University. What can Hindus learn from the Jewish Holocaust? What can Hindus learn from the Jewish Holocaust? The program is at 7 p.m. Eastern, and it's on the registration information is on our website at hindupack.org. We urge you to come and join. There's actually a Holocaust survivor who is going to be speaking at this event today. It's a very pertinent topic in light of what happened in Middle East. It also is a very important topic for Hindus in light of what is happening in Kashmir, in Bangladesh, in Kerala, and all the other, in Pakistan, and all the other places. What can Hindus learn from the Jewish experience? And again, this is in partnership with DCF. It's part of our Hindu Dvesha or Hindu Phobia webinar series today at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, and the registration information is on our website. You can also watch it in the same place you're watching this particular show, on all of the VHPA's social media channels. And without that, also, we come to the very final segment of our show today. And as always, the most anticipated segment of the show, and that is Hindu Phobe of the Week. Utsada, I'm sure you need a good music for that, right? So here we go. Utsada, announce for us, as I put it up on the screen, announce for us the Hindu Phobe of the Week, because you do it so well. But you have to do it with some sense of humor, okay? Don't make it too serious. All right, Utsada, talk about the Hindu Phobe of the Week. You're on mute, Utsada.
The Hindu Phobe of the Week this week is basically, a bunch of missionary organizations who have used the COVID-19 crisis to actually try to convert people. And I'm not the one who is less serious here. My daughter is the one who is more upset at this time. So there have been so many news items out there that talk about how, as Winston Churchill said, no crisis should go to waste. And we saw this during
these people who take advantage of people who are in desperate situation, in a crisis situation, due to these kinds of crises, are basically gutter dwellers. Okay, they want to go.
Well, it is a lesson that we should have learned, and we should have learned many times over, historically.
And by the way, I did not coin this phrase. This is a phrase that was this was the phrase that was coined by Mahatma Gandhi. That these are people who are gutter inspectors, and these are the people who go to gutter and do basically the dirtiest possible deeds. They go there instead of doing selfless service. Look at Sada, we started the program today by talking about what? We started the talk about a life of a person who did selfless service to the community, a selfless leader. And look, where are we ending? A group of people who go around and say, I will give you a little bit of money for food today if you adopt Christianity. this is this is the kind of world we live in today, where instead of adhering to selfless service, serving the society, serving the community, these are the people out there by any means, by force, fraud, or inducement. All they want to do is convert people. Nobody is against legitimately preaching and having people accept one religion or the other. But when you go around buying people out of their traditions, of their culture, of their faith, that is where the problem is. And this is to basically uh, take the cultural roots of the people and uproot them. And this has been, this is the kind of thing that never gets publicity. You see all the people, you see all the pictures of crematoriums with the bodies burning, but you never see pictures of people being given 50 rupees and 100 rupees and asked and being asked to convert. And so that was the worst part. These are the people who take hundreds of thousands, actually millions and millions and hundreds of millions of dollars from their donors, give 10 cents a dollar, 10 cents on a dollar actually gets transferred for this kind of activities. 90% of the money, who knows where it goes? Maybe in the private planes that some of these missionaries fly in. And we end up, with conversion. So the Hindus have to have a response to this, a much stronger response than they have had till so far. This is not sustainable for Hindus.
So this thing isn't something new. It is very pandemic. It is pandemic. It is actually the real pandemic out there, and it started in a very bad way during the tsunami that happened in 2003, I think, in India. And the tsunami that ravaged all the Indian Ocean, countries surrounding the Indian Ocean. And in southern part of India, these missionary, as you said, vultures, literally descended on the villages that were on the sea coasts and tried to do the same thing. So every crisis for them is a crisis to be exploited. Every crisis for them is a crisis that will bring in revenue and donations from their followers around the world. And this gives them an opportunity to expand. And this has its real geopolitical implications. I mean, if you look at many parts in the northeast of the Indian subcontinent, these groups actually support armed terrorist groups, and they try. And in Tripura, for example, for a long period of time, Hindus could not celebrate their religious festivals because these fundamentalist Christian organizations would kill people for celebrating their own festival. So this is something that has to be taken very seriously. And every crisis, any part of the world, this kind of missionary activism is extremely in bad taste, and it continues to happen. It is happening in India as we speak, and I think Hindus have to be vigilant everywhere. And I think that's what you were trying to say when you gave that monologue on this. And I think that's what we have to be talking about more often.
Thank you, Utsoda. And with that, we come to the end of today's program. It ran quite a bit over, Utsoda. We thought we didn't have a topic to talk about. And here we are at the end of hour and a half, but it was a really good topic. I think a lot of people logged in today. I was watching it. So thank you, everyone, for joining. I think this is the kind of topic that interests everyone. So thanks, everyone, for joining, Utsoda. Thank you for all the hard work that you do week in and week out on preparing for this. We'll see everyone again next week. This has been Hindu Lounge. Hindu Lounge is brought to you by Hindu Pact, which is the Hindu policy research and advocacy initiative of World Hindu Council of America. We come live every week at 11 o'clock Eastern on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, and a few days later on Tag TV with Utsav Chakrabarti, Utsoda, who's our executive director of Hindu Pact. I am Ajay Shah, president of World Hindu Council of America. Thank you and namaste. Utsoda, final words before we go to the outgoing music made especially for this show by Decibels.
Thank you, Ajay bhai. And there is never a time when we can stop talking. So every time we prepare for the HinduLounge show, halfway through the preparation, I tell Ajay bhai, we have enough material to talk for 2 hours. And Ajay bhai persists because we have a lot to talk about. So thank you,
We are over
everybody.
prepared.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Soda. And here we go with Decibels and a special music created just for episode number 55 of the Hindu Lounge. Here we go. Decibels, episode number 55 music.